Watch out, Los Angeles, you're being rammed. Someone's playing silly buggers post-peak. Your figures look familiar, like a proper virus until peak, then somehow they just don't want to let you go. Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. Posting this is probably not too sensible. If your politicians are playing silly buggers with your data, not nearly as bad as New York, but still, then the first time somebody calls them on it and shows my work, bye-bye Peerless Reads. The thing about the virus and epidemics, as I've discovered doing this, is that they're both simple and complicated. The rules are simple, and that makes messing about with data complicated. Basically, they're amateurs. Let's assume for a moment that someone wanted to boost death data. Well, you've got a problem, because if you just add 100 deaths, they had to come from somewhere. Sure, if you got 10,000 total cases today and maybe 1,000 deaths, then what's another 100? It just means you've got 1,100 deaths and 11% simple death rate, total deaths to date over total cases to date. But when you're in the escalating phase of the virus, you've got to remember people don't die on the day they enter hospital. You'd have to lag the cases back maybe 9 days if patients survived an average of 9 days. And that might give you only 5,000 new cases, and now your 1,100 is over 5,000 for a 22% death rate, making your patients all about 200 years old. Tricky. And even if you don't boost the 100 today, you've still got 1,000 over 5,000, which is 20%, because you boosted 100 yesterday and 100 the day before, and the real unboosted figure should have been maybe 700 deaths for a death rate of 14%. Here's what happens when you apply lag to UK figures, which are pushing 15%, meaning the implied average age of victims is over 80 years old. The virus must be ripping through care homes to cull that many people. Another way to think of it is, like a dress that looks just right, but if you just pull on the bust to tighten it, the cloth disfigures. It ceases to hang right. Pull it in at the waist and it hitches up. It's all connected. There's a lot that connects for a death to finally occur. You've got the virus growth, normal, not exponential. So that has to continue to look normal, and that's tricky. It's a very specific shaped curve, but if you say, hey, it's statistics, this is real life, then that's like claiming it's raining when it's 100 degrees out and there isn't a cloud in the sky. The mechanics just don't fit your claim. And the human immune system is going to defeat the virus, that's certain. And most people will get the virus and not even notice. That's what's supposed to happen. So now the virus has a harder time finding people to infect. It peaks, it dies off. And politicians, it seems, don't like their drama train dying off. The show ain't over till they say so, not the damned virus. So we get things like this, where it looked like a virus on the way up, but at peak it started to go wild, and then it just took off sideways. If they wanted to cheat, they really should have got a statistician to advise them how to do it. And basically they'd have said, you need a new outbreak, maybe a mutant zombie axe murdering strain, because this one's done. You can't tamper with the numbers without it being noticed, if anybody's looking. So yeah, I'm looking, and that means that if they notice I'm watching, Peerless Reads is going down. At least you'll know why. Now here's the problem. There's what's happening with the UK figures, not nearly as absurd as New York, but bad enough. It seems we're not coming out of our homes until the politicians say so. Now also spot the irony. The virus reported cases are much worse than they should be, and we're in lockdown. And of course, here's our growth rate decline, steady from day one, exactly as you expect with a normal distribution, and it never tanks. If lockdown made a difference, it should show up as a reduced case growth. And here they go again, saying lockdown is working, there's reduced case growth. But there's always reduced case growth at a steady rate of decline, because that's a normal distribution. They're sprinkling magic fairy dust on a bowling ball and claiming it's making a difference, but the damn ball's just rolling on down and it hasn't made an iota of difference. And here it is in cases with our pre-lockdown, no lockdown projection locked, so that now the curve should crash below it as cases plummet. But the virus just keeps on keeping on, with lockdown having no effect until the damn trajectory goes above no lockdown. Maybe that didn't look so bad in log scales, so try it in linear. That damn virus just heads up arithmetically, which neither the exponential heads, lying, mistaken, or just naive, nor I, normal distribution, say is rational, on top of climbing above no lockdown figures. We ain't getting out of this, folks, not until the politicians have milked it for all it's worth. Now, what does that have to do with Los Angeles? Well, does this chart look familiar? Actually, it's even worse than ours, UK, but hey, Amateurville. Let me put it full screen and we'll go through it. Peak growth drops to 1, 6th of April. Celebrate, it's downhill from here. Ho-hum, looking good post-peak. What the? You can almost see them in their offices panicking. Hell, we can't have this. Make it not go away. So we're off, heading sideways with silly numbers, because they know it should look random. Amateurs, I hate them, but hey, maybe they just don't care. Moral of the story, you ain't getting out and back to normal until what, Mr. Gates, Trudeau, UK? No normal till the vaccine. That's right, Los Angeles, you're with us now, screwed and stuck. Now, when did you go into lockdown? March 20th, right? Let's look at that. So let's go full screen again, except I really wanted to look at the trend line before lockdown and found official LA data, which turned out to be broadly in agreement in the middle, and end couldn't be easy and exact, of course, but badly out of sync in early data. Bottom line, it confirms the middle and end sections, but of the two, I treat the gold wiki as more plausible, as it is a declining normal growth rate and has points on the trend line. Ultimately, I wouldn't consider the data strong enough to go to court and say absolutely zero doubt, no room for error, that lockdown isn't working. But what is absolutely sure is that LA is being played. That's what the right-hand side is, as soon as LA gets past peak. Same old, very familiar from UK charts. Here's the lockdown view anyway. This is just to illustrate the constant rate decay, a straight line on log scales, and the dramatic we can't have this on the right. That ain't no viruses. Viruses just do their things, politicians play silly buggers. The gold seems the more reasonable of the two lines, early part consistent with middle trend line. The mauve straight line is constant decline in UK growth on log scale. Peak occurs around 6th of April. So you've got massive disagreement on the left, coming into line, good agreement, and good agreement but a bad situation. Someone doesn't like the idea of you coming out of lockdown. Now let's look at it from a lockdown perspective. The first day of lockdown, around the 21st of March, cannot affect cases. You need the 5-day incubation, that's the earliest point of impact, and then 15-day incubation, that's the latest point of impact. The trend line should tank with people at home. Instead, the trend line continues untroubled by lockdown. The trend line is 0.98 per day. New case increase factor equals 0.98 of old new case increase factor. And now, new cases growth is massive and above the trend line despite being in lockdown. As you can see, around 12th of April they decided, hey, this doesn't work, keep them locked down. If someone wanted to insist that trend line was pure lockdown benefit, well, it's 0.98 as a factor versus 0.9910 for UK no lockdown, and far more prior history to eliminate doubt. So the most you could argue is lockdown dropping an extra % of case growth per day. But that's irrelevant because you're not getting the trend line. Instead, massive increases in days cases back to the bad days of the early cases. Law of big numbers. Those spikes shouldn't be there. The virus is not a pulsar. It does not send out regular radio waves. It's Brownian motion in a big Petri dish called New York or LA or wherever. Random variations will smooth out in large numbers. Instead, here and in New York saw the same pattern, so the same people are doing it. We see the same spike pattern being repeated. It was burning me up, but I've seen these before. Never ended up doing the video because the case numbers were so absurd. But this same repeated spike pattern was in New York data. The same people who are doing New York are doing LA. Like I said, it's tough for a human to simulate a normal distribution, especially when they want to boost it abnormally. Even just entering figures to hand draw one is tough. The temptation to use a quasi-random algorithm to get by is too much, and they fell for it. That ain't a virus. Let's look at one more chart that should be familiar from UK data. Here's the bad normal with wandering case growth giving up all pretense of being a virus. Here's the LA equivalent, which I'll put full screen and describe. Proper virus stuff at the bottom and beginning, going up, heading over, coming down. And then something about the equivalent of a magnum blowing someone's brains out of the normal distribution and splattering them against the wall. The only possible excuse for this is testing, an absurd red herring, and had they been responsible, they would have separated out spurious extra testing from symptomatic cases needing treatment. It will be down to deaths to see if LA is being messed about truly or just by poor data management. But if absurd new cases keep you locked down? Now this is a work of art, but it's going to be tough to absorb, so I'll put it full screen and then we'll go through it slowly. Let's go through it one pair of lines at a time. It's basically our standard chart update with a major twist. In fact, let me generate a standard chart in case this is new to you. First, we have a case total curve, and that line should be going flat, and it starts way up the page. Someone didn't keep very good records in LA, but the climbing on the right is the real concern. Here's what we're looking for. The top two solid lines, long ago gone flat here, for Hubei and South Korea. The dashed orange and dark blue lines are deaths below the parent cases because there are much fewer deaths than cases, but otherwise they're similar. The orange lines Hubei are for reference, just as Mach 1 means 1 times the speed of sound, so a Hubei level contagion would be 1 times Hubei. Korea is sub-Hubei, a great result. Notice Hubei is about 100,000 cases, actually it's 114,000 per 100 million. In deaths, Hubei finished with 3085 deaths. Hubei has 59.17 pop, so to normalize, we get 3085 times 100 over 59.17, or about 5,000 deaths, 5,213. So here's our two key lines for LA, cases total and deaths total. Deaths, the short dashed line naturally, a lot fewer deaths than cases. Now here's a third line, on the right, that's new cases. And one more line right bottom, that's new deaths. Put them all together and you've got an in-depth view of a region on one slide. Cases and deaths totals, cases and deaths today, or on a given day. Now there's one thing missing that our viewers are familiar with, a benchmark. It doesn't matter if you do better or worse, but sure, it'd be nice to do better. We use Hubei, the worst hit province in China, which had about 84% of cases, 95% of deaths in China. If China lied, this is who you'd be shooting past. Most countries, ex-USA, Europe, don't come close to Hubei. Here's all of Hubei, cases and deaths totals, the two smooth lines that level off, and cases and deaths per day, the two jagged lines that drop away, cases above deaths. Showing cases and deaths at the bottom with a linear scale, you see the classic humped curve of a virus contagion, pretty normalish though a bit sharp. Show deaths on its own, and again you get a classic humped curve, typical of virus contagion and at levels way below the herd immunity theory. Our immune system is simply far better at brushing off the virus than people like to acknowledge. which is why you're getting so many 10 times as many infected than realized stories. What they want to do is scare you some more, but you can read those stories as 10 times better at shrugging off the virus than you gave us credit for. So now can we leave our homes? There's LA versus Hubei, and ouch, you've got a virus or somebody that just won't quit. Let's look at a few charts from our last charts update to make the point. Italy, the original worst hit nation in the world, but it's flat pretty much, with deaths and cases per day falling away. Greece, perfectly European but no friend of Brussels, so it didn't seem to feel the need to have horrible figures. They're well below Hubei. Greece lied. Malaysia, again, no interest in US, UK, EU access exaggeration, and that's what our death sentence of New York video makes clear. We're living in a world of exaggeration if you're aligned with or part of the US, UK or EU. So no, I don't like the look of this at all, and notice the surge in cases as it crossed Hubei. It's not that it crossed Hubei, but that it surged that disturbs me. Testing? Maybe. Let's go deep. This is the growth rate for new cases for Hubei. This is how we test for lockdown effectiveness, but it also tests for fake data. That surge and spikiness to the right is a cause for concern. But when I overlay deaths per day, I see that the contagion has collapsed. Small numbers generate big variations, and as long as the contagion has collapsed, who cares? Put them together and I could live with that with a slight proviso, with LA on the right, plus a repeater issue which I think I already mentioned. Put deaths in there for LA and now we have a problem. LA is a mature contagion. It hit peak way back on 5th of April or so, when that trend line hit 1. And from the 12th of April, your cases just took off sideways and your deaths went haywire. Reminder, here's a virus normal distribution of deaths, classic trend line for cases, declining new growth every day, regardless of lockdown. It's a feature of a normal distribution co-opted by government to lie to you. Gosh, can I say lie? If any video gets me taken down, it will be this one, because it's unavoidable. New York is absurd, but it's up to New Yorkers to recognize that. LA, I'd hoped, wasn't absurd, but it turns out that it is. Put deaths in there for LA, and now we have, and here's Hubei deaths, brown or red, whatever, looking perfectly normal, while LA, just when a mature contagion should be dropping, again goes haywire. And what is it with the absurdity of those spikes? Big numbers mean smaller variations, law of large numbers. You've got daily variations there that are bigger than the entire day's deaths in Hubei at peak. And the damn death numbers are going sideways. So at this point I'd be getting a lawyer, not for me but for you, the people of LA. That ain't right, that ain't normal, and as sure as it ain't a virus doing that. Maybe that's enough, but we're going to do something now that's novel, and it's kick-ass, but frankly, if you've survived this far, you've done well. At this point, I'd suggest that I'd happily stand up in court and say the FBI needs to investigate LA's reporting, because remember, that's deaths on the left, so testing isn't an issue. If those are honest reports, then what's infesting LA isn't a virus. Killer zombie insects maybe, brain dead reference, far too close to the scary world we're living in right now, but not a virus. There's only one other possibility. The virus doesn't report cases and deaths. Politicians do, and they have agendas. Here's a key slide from Death Sentence New York. The virus attacks regions or countries differently according to their political allegiance and proximity to New York, UK and EU. Yeah, weird, huh? Go do the math yourself from World Health Organization Daily Situation Reports, rebranded to World Health Organization Situation Reports. These numbers are real. Can you imagine if the New York Times published an article, Coronavirus 10 times more lethal to Democrats than Republicans? Jesus, they did, and I'm not kidding. You might want to look at all those ethnic differences reports in the light of this. I'm not touching it, too busy, but I will flag it. No virus cares about your voting preference, nor the country you live in. But the reported figures don't lie. The only question is, if the virus doesn't hit New York City over 200 times worse than the rest of the world outside the US, UK, EU axis, then why are the reported figures saying it did? And who said it did? This is an FBI matter, pure and simple, and when the FBI come, who do you think they'll come for? The politicians reporting these figures that the FBI works for, or me? So yes, it will be Special Branch or MI5 or whatever, but I've just been bludgeoned into watching Seth Lyons and Dr. Judy Mikovits or something, and guess what? Another banned video. Can you believe this is happening in free and democratic societies? Welcome to the lie of free and democratic. I guess I'll upload a copy of the MP4 for my video so you can have a souvenir. We might not have the pleasure of each other's company for much longer. So let me be absolutely explicit. Those are the government reported figures for each of those countries and ranges of countries. And I downloaded the whole damn world to be sure I wasn't introducing bias. Just go pick up today's New York briefing, whatever it is, and do the math. So here's today's briefing: 327,469 for State of New York, 180,216 for New York City. 327,469 for State of New York, 180,216 for New York City, and bing, 20,828 deaths with a matching 327 figure. And New York City Gov, 14,162 deaths, 5,378 probable. Me, I get a chuckle every time I see that probable death. It ain't difficult. Are they breathing? But sure, probably COVID-19. These days, get hit by a truck after testing positive, and you're COVID-19. But hey, that could just be a rumour. I do know what's not a rumour. An NHS nurse writing to me to say a doctor came round wanting to classify her dad just passed as COVID-19, and she shouted at him, "Don't you dare," and wrote to me to say, "Let's march." Maybe not her exact words, but the meaning was entirely clear. So back to 327 for SNY, 180 for New York City, and deaths matching, etc., 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 etc. I've literally just run this up for you by hand, took maybe 10 minutes, so there's no excuse for reporters, financiers, scientists, etc. not to know this. So the question becomes, why aren't they saying anything? But look at the damn numbers. State of New York, 276 times Malaysia and Australia, standing in for the rest of the world outside you dumb that think your politicians don't lie to you. New York City, 436 times, 602 times, including probable deaths. Well, hell, I'll go for broke. These are your government's official figures. Which do you think is more likely? That the virus has a grudge against New Yorkers, or against Americans 60 times Malaysian or Australia, or against Britons 120 times? Or that politicians have more of an agenda with you guys? Gee, I can't think what it was. Imperial College, massive threat, 530,000 dead. Massive intervention, lockdown. Vaccine critical, then April 5th, Bill Gates, Chris Wallace, Fox News, no normal till the vaccine. Justin Trudeau, no normal until the vaccine. UK government, no normal until the vaccine. And that's the same Bill Gates that funds Imperial College and Ferguson, the same Bill Gates that lied or misrepresented the facts 26 times in 2 minutes 30 seconds, a world record I figure. So there's no agenda, none. Read my lips, it's all a hoax conspiracy theory. And New York City really is hit 600 times worse than Australia. Poor things. Bad virus. I don't have the heart to go into normal distributions and LA curves. I'm just so distraught over learning how badly the three power centers of Big Pharma, one world government, American hegemony, no darn it, New York, UK and EU have been hit. I'll pray for you, honest. And I'll pray especially hard that the people of those great nations, or rather the great people of those nations, start doing arithmetic and seeing how absurd those numbers are. Meantime, with yet another voice for truth silence, a word for our censors. Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. I'm still Andrew May, the 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Feel free to get in touch, andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.